My name is Levente Székely, and it's my privilege and a great pleasure on behalf of the Youth Research Institute to welcome you here today. We are delighted to have you with us to participate in this lecture and the panel discussion entitled Thinking Outside the Box, How to Build a Successful School. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, here at MCC we are trying to collect all the best practices about young people, their learning and education. Our guest today is Katharine Birbalsingh, who is a British teacher and education reformer. She is the founder and the head teacher at the award-winning Michaela Community School in Wembley Park, London. A self-described conservative, she is a known critic of what she describes as a culture of excuses, low standards, and classroom chaos in UK schools. Michaela, in an inner-city school with pupils of all and every culture, ethnic, and religious background, was rated outstanding in a recent official inspection. Katharine Birbalsingh graduated from the University of Oxford and has always taught in inner London. She has made numerous appearances on television and radio and has written for several UK publications. Katharine has written 2 books and added 2 more, including The Power of Culture. She has also recently served as a head of the UK government's Social Mobility Commission. She was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire in the 2020 birthday honors by Queen Elizabeth II. We appreciate that Ms. Birbalsingh accepted our invitation for the first call. We are honored to have Professor Gábor Halász and Ferenc Sullivan with us today, who will participate in a panel discussion about the successes and the failures of our contemporary education systems. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let me welcome Britain's trickiest headmistress, Katharine Birbalsingh. Madam, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to see me speak today. I'm sorry I'm unable to speak in Hungarian, and so thank you again for your patience, and I hope you're able to follow along with what I'm saying. So as you've been told, I am the strictest headmistress in Britain, that's what they say. And luckily you are all on time, so I will not have to put you into detention. But anyone who's late, we will have to organize detention for them. Now, in Britain, life in schools is a lot more progressive than life in school here in Hungary. And when I say progressive, I mean more modern, more relaxed, more trendy than what is considered to be a more traditional education. And at Michaela, at my school, at our school, we embrace tradition. And so I suppose in many ways we are more like schools in Hungary than we are like schools in Britain. In fact, when we have a parents' evening with new parents whose children have just arrived, I always say to the parents, because our parents come from all over the place, some from various parts of Eastern Europe, some from India or China or Jamaica or Nigeria or everywhere. And I say to them, where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? And they name countries all over the world, and I explain that our school is more like the schools they know in Poland or in Jamaica than the schools that are next door to where we are. And I feel this is a great shame because I believe traditionalism works. And one of the things that I want to do for you today is to ring the alarm bells for you because while Hungary is relatively traditional now, Britain used to be like that 50 years ago. Our schools were very traditional. In fact, people modeled the idea of the traditional school on the British traditional education. However, in 50 years, things have transformed, and it's hard to underestimate how different schools are in Britain now to the way they were 50 years ago. And this happens without anyone noticing, okay? So it is very important that you here in Hungary hang on to your values, because it's the values that make a school, and you must fight to keep those values, or they will disappear right in front of you without you noticing. And one day you wake up and you wonder why everything is in such a mess, and you may be the only one wondering, because everyone else has got so used to it, they don't notice it anymore. So let me just start here. How do I get this to appear? Is this going to, or do I need to press this one? No? If you just put it on for me.
Just up here.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So, how to build a successful school. Now, why do I have a woman with shoes, trying on shoes? I'll tell you why. Because a school is not like a shoe shop. And people assume that if you are a teacher, you are not very clever. That is what they think. If you are a teacher, you must be some sort of failure. And people who run businesses, or who become lawyers, or who become doctors, these people are successful. That is how it is seen. Perhaps not so much here. Perhaps you are still of the thinking that teachers are successful. In the West, out in America or Canada or Australia or in Britain, none of these countries, you really are considered to be a failure if you're a teacher. And yet I would say that running a school or teaching well, and that's an important point, teaching well is the hardest job there is. If you run a shoe shop, all you have to do is buy some blue shoes and some red shoes and some yellow shoes. And when the client appears, he asks for the blue shoes, and you give him a pair of blue shoes. He gives you some money, you put it in the till, and he goes away. He appears for about 5 minutes and then disappears again. In a school, our clients don't want to be there. The people who go to a shoe shop go there with an intention of getting shoes. The children who go to school, I always say they go with the intention of learning, but they are quickly distracted from this goal by some friend who's knocking them and another friend who's laughing at them, and something is happening outside the window. And they would far prefer to be at home playing video games. And they don't just come for 10 minutes. They come for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. They come for a long time, and we're not just selling them something which they then get to take away. We are trying to mold them into human beings who will be successful. We are trying to make them into something, not just give them knowledge, that's one thing we're doing, not just give them skills, but to give them a sense of moral purpose in their lives, where they're able to be good citizens and live decent lives. That is an extraordinary thing, to be able to do it well. And I would say that many schools fail in doing this simply because it is so hard to do. Now, we're not just trying to do that. We're also trying to allow equal opportunity for everybody. So we're trying to get the children who come from rich families to succeed, But we're also trying to get the children from poor families to succeed, even though they don't have books at home, even though mom and dad are working 4 or 5 jobs, even though no one has conversations with them. We are trying to develop them in the same way as we're trying to develop the child who has more opportunities at home. We're also trying to develop the children with parents who are alcoholics, parents who are drug addicts, parents who are never there. Sometimes these can even be the rich parents who are off flying around the world and don't care much about their child. And I know this is a controversial thing to say. How can it be that some parents don't care about their children? But I see this. I have seen it all my life. Some parents put everything they have into their child, and some parents put very, very little. Now, my way of trying to do right by children is this, which is to be the red fish and to go in the opposite direction of the way in which most people are going. And this is when I say to you, I'm ringing the alarm bells for you, because progressivism is very seductive. And it takes in everyone. There are very few people who resist. And when I say progressivism, what do I mean? So the idea that teaching children from the front of the classroom, where everyone is looking at the teacher in the way that you are looking at me now, instead of a more progressive classroom, has desks that are facing each other, and the children are looking at each other and teaching each other instead of the teacher leading the learning from the front. Now, for those of us who have never seen this, we might think that's a very strange thing to do. Why would you do that? The reason why people have become more progressive is what happens is, all of you, for instance, when Hungary decides to, embrace the progressive revolution, all of you will look back to your school days and you'll say, gosh, it was boring. Gosh, my teacher just talked and talked and it was so boring. I wish it could have been more interactive. I wish it could have been more fun. I know what we need to do. Let's put the desks together in groups. And that way the children can teach each other. Because when you teach each other, you learn more. It sounds like a very exciting idea, doesn't it? In fact, you may even do it with your cousins or your younger brothers or sisters. You may find yourself trying to encourage them to teach each other instead of doing the teaching yourself, because it seems like a good idea. And you remember those boring teachers that you had, and you forget that the reason why you are successful is because of those boring teachers. The reason why you know how to write and how to read and how to do maths and so on is because some boring teacher taught it to you. And she stood at the front of the class and she kept talking, because had she not talked, you would not have heard her wisdom, okay? Now, you might listen to me and think that this all sounds perfectly normal. I promise you that across the Western world, I am very controversial for saying these things. I am considered to be the strictest headmistress in Britain because I expect children to behave, and I give them a detention when they don't behave. In Britain, this is controversial. So we need to go in the opposite direction of what I would say feels good. So, it's really interesting being here in the Roger Scruton Cafe. And I was saying to the people I was speaking to earlier that in Britain, we could never have a Roger Scruton Cafe, despite the fact that Roger Scruton is British. Not only is he British, but he loved his country. He loved his country so much. And Roger Scruton came to visit us at Michaela in 2015, and he spoke to the children about fox hunting. Now, I don't know if you know what fox hunting is. It is a very English experience, very traditional experience, where the men sit on horses, and they have bugles, and they have red coats, and the fox runs away, and the dogs chase the fox. And the men go around, and they blow the bugle, and they wear the red coats. Roger Scruton would have done a much better job than I am of describing fox hunting. In fact, I had him come to speak about fox hunting to the children, because urban children in the inner city have no idea what fox hunting is. And fox hunting is very controversial in Britain. There are those who live in the countryside who like fox hunting, and those who live in the city who think it is very cruel, because the fox is torn apart by the dogs. Okay, and so it's not a very nice death. So Roger Scruton came and he defended fox hunting to the children. I do not believe he convinced them. They all looked very horrified as he spoke about how wonderful fox hunting is. Now, I rather regret I didn't have him talk to the teachers instead about beauty, about liberty, about all the philosophy that he talks about normally. Instead, I had him talking about fox hunting to the children, which now that he has gone, I will forever regret. But you live and you learn. This is something that I have learned in life, and I will always regret having done, because I had the brilliance of Roger Scruton in my school, and I had him talking about fox hunting. But in any case, we could never have this cafe. And the reason we could never have this cafe is because Roger Scruton was a small c conservative. Now, I too am a small c conservative, and the values of small c conservatism are throughout my school, Michaela. And I would say that these values are the number one reason why we are so successful. And it is also the number one reason why I am so controversial, because small c conservatism these days is not attractive and it is not trendy. We had Jordan Peterson come to visit us at school, you will see here. But because I had learned from my mistakes with Roger Scruton, I had Jordan Peterson speak to the staff and not the children. And he spoke about his ideas around liberty and beauty and all of these philosophical ideas that I wish I had had Roger Scruton talk to the teachers about. And as you can see here, he was saying to me that he thought we were playing a very sophisticated game with the children. And it's true. We are playing a game. We tell them these are the right things to do, these are the wrong things to do. When they do the right things, we praise them. When they do the wrong things, we punish them. The word punish in Britain is, you cannot use it, right? You're not allowed to use it. In schools, they moved from the word punish to punish a child. They moved then to the word sanctioning a child. So no one could say punishing a child. They talked instead of sanctioning children. Then they said the word sanctioning was terrible. We couldn't use the word sanctioning. So then we had to use the word correcting. And then you were to correct a child. And then eventually, some years later, they said, no, you can't correct a child because this is too traumatic for the child to talk about corrections. So they then said, we need to talk about consequences. I do not know what the next word will be in a few years' time, but at some point, consequences will be unacceptable to our ears as teachers and to the children as well. So, he said we're playing a sophisticated game, and it is a sophisticated game. And all of you who are parents, all of you who have younger brothers and sisters, will know this, that it's a game that you play. Children come to school to learn, and then they push back. And what I mean by that is they will misbehave. And from what I understand from talking to some Hungarians here, that behavior can be a problem in Hungarian schools. And of course it can be a problem. It's always a problem everywhere with children. Children are naughty. That's what they do. And they expect us to play our role as teachers and as parents and punish them when they are naughty so that they will learn not to misbehave in the future. Unfortunately, there are too many of us these days who want to be friends with children. And I always say, you can be friends with your children either when they are children or when they are adults, but you cannot be both, okay? So you have to choose. You can be great friends with them when they are little, and it means they will hate you when they are older. Or you can make sure that they are angry with you all the time when they are younger and fighting back, and you're saying, no, no, no. And when they are adults, they will love you for it because they will turn into adults who you will like. Jordan Peterson talks about this idea that you do not want to raise your children to be people, to be adults who you don't like. Now, I want to talk about a few whole school systems, things that we do. Now, Rousseau. Rousseau is the guy, it's all his fault. Rousseau is the guy who said that we need to draw things out of the child rather than put things into the child. And so you see primary school teachers in Britain who will hold up a picture of a triangle and a square to 4-year-olds and will say, which one is the square? Now, how are they meant to know which one is the square unless someone has told them? It's impossible for them to know. And what I always say to teachers is, if you have not taught them this information and they answer the question, that means someone else taught them that knowledge. You didn't teach it to them, someone else did. And the reason why teachers can be fooled by this, they think they're drawing it out of the child, is that they ask the child a question, they have not taught them the answer, the child answers the question, and the teacher believes, I have drawn it out of them, just like Rousseau said, okay? But that's not what happened. It's that someone else taught them that knowledge. And the problem, if we go back to what I say here about equal opportunity for all, is that when this happens, little Johnny at the back of the classroom, who comes from a family where there are no books, who does not have daily conversations with his parents about the politics of the day, little Johnny at the back looks at little Amy at the front and thinks, Amy's really clever. Amy's always answering the questions. The teacher has never taught the answers to the questions, but Amy always knows the answers. And that is because Amy's parents at home are teaching her these things every time they have a conversation, every time they read a book together. And it looks to Johnny as if Amy is just really, really clever. Johnny then assumes that he is dumb. What Johnny does not think in this moment is, I must be from a different socioeconomic background to Amy. It must be that my parents don't have books, and so that is why I don't know the answer. He does not think that. He thinks he's dumb, and so he feels humiliated. In order to regain respect for himself, he will interrupt the lesson by knocking David and knocking John and being silly. And in the end, he gets sent out of the class. Johnny, over time, falls further and further behind. Eventually, the school says he has special needs. He does not have special needs. It's just that his teacher never taught him the answer. And that happens in classroom after classroom after classroom across the Western world. You know, it's interesting. I ran into these Australians earlier, and the dad was, there were 5 children. The dad was saying to me how in Australia, well, and here too, they homeschool their children. And he was a little embarrassed because I am a teacher. He said, oh, you homeschool. And, you know, he wanted to avoid the conversation. And I said, that's okay. And he said, oh, well, you know, I said, he said, teachers don't like it when parents homeschool because they school their children at home. And I said, no, well, I am not a typical teacher. I think it's a good thing that you are teaching your children at home. And so they do not go to school. They do not go to normal school. And he said, well, the thing is that teachers take it as an insult that we are homeschooling. And I said, Well, that's because it is an insult. It is true. You are insulting the school system by choosing to home educate your children. It is just that I think it is a just insult. I think it is accurate. And I respect parents who take their children out of the school system because there are too many schools that fail children. Now, when I say not just rote learning, when I talk about putting things into the children, people often misunderstand me, and they think that all we do is get children to learn facts by heart. But this is not true. Some facts need to be learned by heart, like history dates, or your English verbs or your French verbs, and you learn them by heart. Fine. You learn your times tables by heart. But there are other things that you need to take apart and put together and write an essay on Shakespeare's Macbeth. That is not learning by rote. But it does not mean there is not room for rote learning. Teaching is complex. It is very difficult. And unfortunately, because as a society, I think generally we do not have any respect for our teachers, everybody thinks anyone can do it, and it can be done any which way. This is not true. There is an optimal way for teaching. There is an optimal way for the best kind of classroom. And unfortunately, we don't seek it out. And that's the case in Hungary, too. It will be the case that you move from classroom to classroom in one school in Hungary, and you will see different types of teaching depending on where you go in and who you are watching. That should not be the case. Teaching is the only profession that does this. Heart surgeons, when they go in to do heart surgery, do not say to each other, I'll try it out this way, you try it out that way, let's see how it turns out in the end. They don't do this in any other profession. But in teaching, anything goes. You do what you like in your own classroom, and you will remember from your own school days, you had some great teachers and some terrible teachers. That doesn't happen with surgery, right? And it doesn't happen in any other profession. You go to medical school to learn processes and procedures, which you then have to deliver, okay? Now, there will be some differences, and sometimes you need to make a snap decision because something goes wrong. Fine. But only in teaching do we say anything goes. Now, with my senior team, I meet daily. We are obsessive about the details. Gabo earlier was talking to me, and he was saying how in the research that he has done about our school and about me, that we are a very dynamic school, and that it's wrong for me to describe us as traditional. And perhaps we can get into that more in detail later, because when you hear tradition, you have one idea in your mind, and that is not really what Michaela is about. And it's true. I would say we are a modern, traditional version of a school, that while we believe in the teacher leading the learning and in traditional discipline, we also look at cognitive science on how the brain learns, and we make sure that our children are taught in an optimal way, in the best way possible. Bureaucracy is something that we have banned completely, and I wanted to talk to you about because I think that, I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that your schools and your institutions are probably too bureaucratic. And I suspect that this will stem from the days, your communist days, and the form filling, the writing down of everything, all of this, that there will be too much of it. The reason why I suspect this is that I've already come across it in Hungary too much. There's lots of forms. You know, even just coming here, my PA, fill out this form, fill out another form. Like, how many forms do we have to fill out? If you have people filling out forms, and that's all anybody's doing, they're not doing the stuff that matters. And so one way in which you could improve your schools or any institution would be to cut as much bureaucracy as possible. We hardly write anything down at Michaela. Digital detox. Now, this is something the Minister for Culture, who we met with this morning, was talking to me about, that he feels, and I think he's right, because this is the case all over the world, that children these days, their biggest enemy is the smartphone and unsupervised access to the internet. Parents have no idea the harm they are doing to their children by giving them a smartphone. I tell all of our families not to give their children a smartphone at all. In England, there are many schools that require the children to have a smartphone. And they use the smartphone in the lessons. And they say, everyone get out your phones and find this and find that. It's ridiculous. There are other schools that say no to the smartphone, but then when the children get their phone out and are on it in the lessons, the teacher leaves them with it because it means the child is quiet, so they don't bother them when they get on their phone. Sometimes I visit schools and the earphones are in and the children are listening to music while they are supposedly working. We ask parents not to give them phones at all. Now, lots of parents don't listen to us, but I see a real difference. Those children who don't have smartphones, I watch them move from the bottom set to the third set to the second set to the top set. And the ones with phones move down. Happens all of the time. Because the phone breaks your brain. It actually makes you more stupid. There's lots of studies done on this. A book cannot compete with a smartphone. A smartphone has colors and explosions and is exciting. A book is black and white and flat. So if you have in Hungary small children with phones, I can guarantee you in 20 years, those children will not be able to read like you read now. And this is a real danger for any country. You have to get hold of the problem of the digital age. The unsupervised access to the internet means that it's not just phones. They're on their laptops, parents are not watching, and the children are getting onto all sites, all kinds of sites that they should not be seeing and will ruin their lives. They can meet gang members, they can meet pedophiles, they can meet all kinds of people who will do them great harm. And I see this happening at my school and from children all over the place. I say it, people say to me that I just want to cause fear. The fact is that this is a real problem that we all need to get hold of. And the best thing that we could do for children is ban phones altogether. We don't allow them to smoke cigarettes. We don't allow them to have sex. We don't allow them to drive cars or to drink alcohol or to do any number of different things. Smartphones will be on that list one day. It's just that it's too new a technology now for us to realize. But in 100 years, I can promise you, we will not be allowing children to go on smartphones. And the best thing we can do for children now is to ban them from them right now, if we can. The effort versus impact. I mean, this is the case for any institution, not just schools. You've always got to weigh it up. Is the effort that we're putting in, is it going to give us enough impact to value the effort being put in? Because often people think, oh, it's a good idea in school, and then they spend lots of time doing something for very little impact. And it's for the leader to make those decisions. The parents, look, my position on parents is you cannot please all of the people all of the time. You have to know what you are about as a leader, what you believe, and then you need to push forward with those beliefs. And if parent X doesn't like it, parent X doesn't like it. I say, you can find another school if you like. That is my position. Because I have a belief on how my school should be run, and that is how I'm going to run it. Don't be sentimental, holding children to account. I've spoken somewhat about this. There need to be systems of behavior, you need to have high standards of behavior, and you need to punish children when they misbehave. And if there are problems in Hungarian schools, which I suspect there are, it will be because the teachers are not following through with making sure in a consistent manner that the children are being punished in the same way in every single classroom. And that is for the principal of the school to make sure that the systems are consistent throughout. I've spoken a bit about traditionalism and said that we are modern in our traditionalism. But essentially, traditionalism, I mean, Roger Scruton was a great traditionalist. He believed in order. He believed in structure. He came to our school and was so amazed by what he saw. He couldn't believe it, because here were children who normally should be failing and in chaos and running and screaming and shouting and fighting. None of that was happening in the school. And that is because we believe in small c conservative values, like personal responsibility, like having a duty towards other people, like understanding the idea of habit formation over time with children, and acquiring those habits through constant repetition. And eventually, there's a lovely quote from Roger Scruton on my wall where he talks about exactly this, that virtues are acquired over time through constant repetition with a child, even when the child does not understand the reason for it. You do it over and over again, and eventually the child will do it. Here's the chocolate bar. Ah, what do you say? Here's the chocolate. What do you say? Please, right, here you go. And each time you keep doing it. And we all say please and thank you without thinking about it, because somebody drilled it into us when we were little. It didn't happen by magic. Somebody took the time to withhold the chocolate until we said please, and when we took the chocolate, expected us to say thank you. Too often, one of the big mistakes adults make is that they underestimate the knowledge that they have, and they underestimate what it took to get you to be who you are. You presume you were always this person. You were not this person. Somebody, probably your mother, took time with you every day to drill you in the things that have made you into a successful human being. And with school, where schools need to make up the gap is when parents fail to do this, schools then need to do that in the place of the parents. I've talked about behavior and small c conservatism already, and I'll move to the next slide where I'm just talking about leading with gusto and belief. Like I said, I have beliefs about how a school should be run, and I don't sway from those beliefs. I believe in being the best. I believe there's a best way of teaching, a best way of disciplining, a best way of running the school. And so we change all the time in order to be the best. In teaching, there is this idea that there is no best and that everybody should do whatever they want. This is wrong, in my view. In order to think like this, you need to be brave. And you need to go out there and do things differently and be the red fish. This can be quite hard because a lot of people will hate you for it. But you've got to do it that way, because otherwise you end up failing the children in front of you. You've got to be honest, be candid. So we have a culture of candor at my school, where we get stars for being candid with one another, meaning being truthful with one another, and saying, I didn't like the way you came into my classroom yesterday and interrupted my lesson. And to go and say that, perhaps to your line manager, to your boss, and you say it, and the boss says, oh, that's interesting. I didn't mean to do that, and you can sort out the problem. Being sensible. What I mean by that is common sense. Common sense has gradually disappeared in Britain. It's completely disappeared. I think you still have some of it here in Hungary. You must fight to keep it. Do not assume that it will stay with you, okay? If you are not fighting to keep it, you will lose it. There is a law called O'Sullivan's Law, which is that if an institution does not regularly fight the tendency toward moving towards the left, right? Moving away from conservatism. If you are not fighting that leftist pull all the time, you will necessarily become more progressive, okay? There's nothing you can do. So you have to be fighting progressivism. If you're not fighting it, you will become more progressive without even realizing it. If you take nothing else from me today, remember that. You have to fight progressivism daily, all of the time. Otherwise, you will become more progressive. That's for any institution, any kind of school, any kind of community. You need to be clear. You need to be consistent in school. Kids are kids, and they love a loophole, right? They love a misunderstanding. Oh, Oh, I thought biology was over there. You mean it's not outside in the playground? I thought it was. Children lie. Children say all kinds of things. People say to me, their parents say, my child would never lie. And I say, is your child an alien? Because your child must be an alien, because every child I have ever met lies. It's what they do. And that does not mean that I hate children. It means I know children. And anyone who pretends that their child doesn't lie, well, they are lying, right? This is what is so funny. These parents are lying when they say their children do not lie. You need to be everywhere in a school. You have to have eyes in the back of your head. And you need to believe in the good fight. Like I say, you have to fight that progressive tendency to move towards the left and to make excuses for children and to not be in charge and to not be in control and have order and structure. It makes you feel like you're mean, but it is in being mean that you are kind. And like I say, our motto is to work hard and be kind. We want all children to be able to do those two things at the very minimum, to understand what it is to work hard and to understand what it is to be a good person in being kind. So I'll just finish off by saying you are all very welcome to come and have lunch with us at Michaela. We have lunch with the children. The children will take you on a tour. You can then sit with the children and talk to them. It's only a flight away. If you are in London, all you need to do is sign up on the website. We have up to 1,000 visitors that come and visit us every year. Every day we have 10, 20, 30 visitors in the school. They sit and eat with the children. They look at the classrooms. They meet the children. It's wonderful. There's also a documentary about the school at that website. This is the producer's website, strictastheadmistress.com, which you can watch. There is also our book called, I know, it's so silly, isn't it? It's such a silly title. They call me the strictest headmistress. I mean, you see me. I think people imagine I walk through the corridors with whips and chains and I'm beating children and so on. Obviously, this is not true. I just believe in having high standards for children, and I use the word punishment. That makes me the strictest headmistress in Britain. We also have our book. That is perhaps more for teachers, but the documentary is a nice way of being able to see what we are about. There are 12 rules in it for not just teaching children, the raising of children. Because everything I say here does not just apply to teachers and schools, this applies to parents. It's how to deal with children, how to make sure that you raise your children in such a way so that when they are adults, you will love them. And they will be people who can lead successful lives. So I will leave it at that. Thank you very much for coming to see me today. I know we are now going to have a conversation with Gabo and Ferenc. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katharine. We will wait for Dr. Halász to sit down. Katharine has been introduced by Dr. Levente Székely, but we also have Professor Gábor Halász joining us from the Teaching Institute Learning Institute, I apologize, at MCC, and he is also professor at the Faculty of Education and Psychology at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest. Let me begin with putting the title of the documentary about Michaela into context, Britain's Strictest Headmistress. According to Department of Education statistics, there are 32,226 schools at the moment in the UK, which puts you at the top of these tens of thousands of schools. So perhaps it's time to aim higher and aspire to become the strictest in the world. There are between 4 and 7 million schools in the world, according to Google.
Actually, Ferenc, if you, I mean, at least it was the case, If you type into Google, who is the strictest teacher in the world, my name will come up. So there you go.
Okay, so you are a well-known person in education circles in Britain, and you are a divisive person without any doubt. The New Statesman magazine has described you as a professional provocateur and a tyrant, among other things. Yet, of course, some commentators on the other side of the spectrum have described you as visionary and an example to be followed for everyone in education. What is your story? Can you please give us some insight into your personal background and your path to Michaela, to leading this exemplary school? And then we'll, of course, proceed to Dr. Halász.
Yes, and just to explain a bit about Michaela, to give you some sense, so there are these 30,000 schools, but of that, the secondary schools, there are 3,500 secondary schools in Britain. And there is a Progress 8 score. It's a score that all schools are given for the progress that they make with their 11-year-olds up to the age of 16. And at age 16, the children take national GCSE exams in Britain, and then these exams are ranked, and all of the schools are ranked according to the progress that they have made from when the children entered at age 11 to when they left at age 16. And last year, we at Michaela got the top Progress 8 score in the country. So it's just to give you a sense of, well, why are we talking about my school? We do a great job with the children in terms of their results. But it is also the case that our children are very polite and wonderfully behaved and just very nice people. And so teachers come and look at the children and say, how have you got them to behave like this? Even head principals of private schools with a highly selective intake, they come and they look and they say, but your children are so much more polite than our children. How do you do this? So that is why I suppose I have become more well known. Having said that, I became very well known because in 2010, I gave a speech at the Conservative Party conference. So I was an ordinary teacher. I was a deputy head in a school. And then I was writing a blog about my experiences. It was anonymous. And I wrote this blog anonymously about being a teacher and the things that I would see going wrong in the classrooms and in the school. And I then gave this speech at the conference because I was invited to go, not because I was political, but I just went because I was invited. And it was only a 5 or 6 minute speech, but the things I said, and you can find it still, if you were to go on Google and type in Katharine Birbalsingh conference, Conservative Party conference 2010, you'll find the speech. It's very short. But the things I say, I suppose, are considered to be controversial. So when the New Statesman says that I'm a provocateur, I'm not doing it deliberately, but what I say does provoke. I'm just saying what I think. And what I think is controversial. And so that's why I end up offending people. And I gave this speech, and then I lost my job. And I lost my job because of the things that I said and because of the fact that I was at the Conservative Party conference, I think. This is my opinion. And so it's hard to say, really, but when I say I lost my job, I had to resign because it became untenable. I couldn't stay there. I was all over the media. It was, I was sent home after making the speech, and then the press got involved, and so I then had to find a way of getting back into teaching. And in those days, in 2010, in fact, that same year, the Conservative Party had just started in government, and they had brought along this idea of free schools. Now, this was to copy somewhat the charter school system in the United States. And what a free school is anyone can set one up. So I, as a teacher, could apply to the Department for Education to set up my own school, get funding from central government, and it would be free to the children who go there, but I could do it myself. And so it took me 3.5 years to set up this school. It took a long time because there were lots of people trying to stop me. We would have meetings like this with interested parents, interested families who I would meet on the street. I would give them a flyer. They would come to find out about the school. And there would be people who wanted to stop us who would sit amongst the families. And then when I would try to talk to them, they would stand up and start shouting at me in order to stop me from giving information to the families about the school. So it took a very long time. Eventually we found a building. Eventually we opened in 2014. And we have since been going for 8 years. And the school, of course, has become very successful. So I was already known for what I said in 2010, but then it was worse because I then proved to everybody that what I was saying was right. It was possible to do something different with a school, and I did that. And so some people have come on board with it, I have to say. You know, all these teachers who come to visit us, they come to learn and find out more. And then there are others who continue to fight us. And so that is what makes me controversial, because there are people who fight what I'm saying, as opposed to just thinking, hey, look, these children are learning a lot. Maybe the ideas are good. Maybe we should try them out at our school. Now, you would hope that everyone would think that. But unfortunately, ideology can be very restraining and can stop people from being open-minded about what might work in a school.
Thank you. So it's clear to me that in the Michaela model, high performance and good learning outcome are closely tied to what you call strictness, high expectations, high demands, and essentially not allowing kids to wreak havoc and to use punishment if necessary. In Hungary, and this is a question to Professor Halász, generally this strictness versus leniency debate revolves around whether or not our curriculums should focus on passing on factual knowledge, or we should rather put emphasis on critical thinking, on allowing kids to arrive at conclusions for themselves, or to process information independently and in a critical mindset. I think that's a fundamental difference that lies between the conservative and the progressive approach in Hungary. So what is your take on that? How are we... what is best suited for the, to achieve a favorable outcome?
So you are asking me about Hungary. Well, I think I would like to share with you my reaction to what Katharine said. So let me confess that I spent the last 2 days studying her life and her work, discovering who she is, and I definitely would recommend to everyone to do the same. So I would say that she is now one of the most interesting characters in education in the UK, or maybe even in Europe. So you have been producing something which is really worth being studied. We didn't see the photos about the school you created. If we had seen photos, we would have seen that practically all the students are.
Well, let me, you know, there was some music. Let me play, just because there is a video, but
so
I
if you want to imagine.
Look, you don't have to imagine. You can see it here. You just won't be able to hear the music that goes along with it. But
yeah. So if you want to compare it with what we have here, imagine a school in the most challenging district of Budapest, let's say the 8th district, where let's say 90% of students are coming from poor Roma families. So this is the kind of school Katharine is leading. So this is not an elite school. And when she was talking about the outstanding scores, that was what we call added value. So this is progress score, which is showing what you added to the input you got when students entered. So I would say that this is really a wonderful school. I think that in this country we would call this school an alternative school. An alternative school which is doing something very different from the mainstream. You are doing something which is very different from the mainstream. And the legal status of a school is what I think we would call a private school. So this is a quasi-private school which is getting funding directly from the state budget, but you are an autonomous. The status is formally called free school. Your school is a free school.
Yes.
And now, before coming to Hungary, I don't know whether I really would like to talk about Hungary. So
You're free to talk about whatever you like.
What she's doing is so wonderful that I prefer to talk about. But I would have a question to you.
Because I feel so bad that everyone's having to listen. It's bad enough they have to hear me in English, and then they're having to hear you in English. Why don't you tell them in Hungarian? Because we spoke earlier. Tell them what you were telling me, but you can tell them in Hungarian. What you were saying about the freedom, about why you get excited about the idea of free schools, and why it doesn't exist here, what that means. Your question about, well, what would somebody like me wonder about here, and all of that we discussed. Tell them all in Hungarian, because I know what you're saying.
I do not want to talk Hungarian here.
Oh.
I keep English. But yes.
Well, it's just so interesting, and you could tell them in 2 minutes everything.
Yes, one of the things that I was doing while talking with Katharine was that I was imagining her in this country. So a person like her, with her creativity, with her spirit of revolting against the mainstream, with her dynamism. So what would she do if she was here? What kind of role she would have? And I try to imagine that. So
well, it was a good question. And it was a really good question because, you know, what Gabo was saying was you talk about traditionalism, and the thing is that things are quite traditional here. So what would everything be perfect here? And I said, oh, no, not at all. And he said, well, in what way would it be different? You know, why would I have a problem with what goes on here? I would have the same problems. So when I said to you that when you look back at school and you think so-and-so was boring, this teacher was boring, oh, how can we make it more exciting? People then jump to the progressive model and think that this is the solution. But it's just that those teachers did traditionalism badly. So they didn't think about cognitive science and how the brain learns. They just spoke a lot at the front of the class, and the bright kids got it and did the exercise, and the not so bright just ended up not doing very well and they failed the test, and then we just blame the child and we say, well, you should have worked harder, and that's that. There's two things there, which is that at my school, there's a sense that the teacher is responsible for how all of the children are doing in their class. I always say, teachers must judge themselves by the worst 5 children in the class, not by the 5 best ones. And if you can find, when you ask a question, and if there are 5 children who cannot answer that question, there's something wrong with your teaching. Because you should have taught it in such a way that every single child is able to answer that question. There's something wrong with you as a teacher, nothing wrong with the children, right? So that's a key difference. I suspect that in many Hungarian classrooms, they ask questions, 5 children put their hands up. In our classrooms, all of the children are putting their hands up. All of them. I always say if 75% of the children have not, it should always be at least 75% have got their hands up. Unless you're asking something really hard and you know only your brightest are going to be able to get it, right? Otherwise, you're expecting them because they all should be listening and they should all be with you. So there's that. Where does responsibility lie? Now, it is true that the child is responsible for himself, but it can also be true that the teacher is responsible for every child in her classroom. And what we find is that people swing one way or the other. They say either it's the child who's responsible or it's the teacher who's responsible, when actually it is both. And then there is just the point about how you are teaching. Do you revisit the information? Do you start the lesson with recapping what you did the last lesson to see if they remember it? Do you come back to that 2 days later and then 5 days later and know that you need to revisit from time to time because that's how the brain is going to remember stuff? If you're not doing that as a teacher, you're doing a bad job. Now, these techniques, when it comes to cognitive science, are never taught in teacher training. You'd think that they would be, but they're not, right? So teachers are just thrown into the classroom and they do whatever it is that they want to do. Nobody gets taught anything. And so we are very keen on maximizing the output from the children and understanding there is an optimal way, there is a best way of teaching. So if I were here, I would be saying, there are too many boring teachers. There's too many teachers just standing at the front and talking and talking. The teachers are not being held to account. You know, so I would have a problem with the traditionalism that exists here. And I'd want to change it to make it into better traditionalism, not to make it progressive. That's key. Now, Ferenc also said something really interesting there, where he said about the critical thinking thing. Now, that's the thing that always seduces people into progressivism. They think that traditionalism cannot create creativity or thinking for yourself or critical thinking. That's what they think. They are wrong. It is only through traditionalism that you get to be a critical thinker. It is only through traditionalism that you get to be, I mean, what I find hilarious, you know, all of these great thinkers in the past, John Stuart Mill, Shakespeare, I don't know, name anybody, right, who lived in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century, who did anything creative. They all had a traditional education. Every single one of them. Not one of them had a progressive education. Not one. So you look at Michelangelo and you say, gosh, look at the creativity. He must have had a progressive education. He did not. He had a traditional education. So it is a nonsense to think that progressivism is what creates critical thinking. It's quite the opposite. It's traditionalism. Go on.
So now I can answer your question after listening to what Katharine said, because from your words, it became very, very clear that the educational goals you have are 21st century skills, critical thinking, creativity, but you reach this goal using the traditional method. But your goals are the same as those, the progressives.
That's right.
But they do not know the tool.
That's right.
They do not know the instrument.
That's
they do not know how to get there. And you know how to get there.
That's right.
And now I think that this is the answer to your question, that we do not have a discussion about the goals. We have the same goals. I mean that everyone who is thinking in a modern way like you do, has the same goal, but you have the knowledge that others do not have.
Yeah.
But may I have a question here? Because when I was reading your book that you presented, I thought of a school in Hungary which is operating in a very similar environment than your school. So they have more than 80% children from poor ethnic minority families. And they produce the same results as your school. But they use a different approach, a different technique. You also have a pedagogical technique. This is what you presented on the slide, the whole school
systems.
slide, where you showed all the building blocks of your pedagogical technology. But in the school I am talking about, I realized that this technology, which is different from yours, is successful because the school has a wonderful leader. The school created an extraordinary organization, a coherent community. So in your case, what explains from your results, what explains of your results of the technology you are using and the organization you created, which was created under your leadership?
Yeah, it's true that in order to succeed these days in school, you need a strong leader because you have to go against the grain. In order to be that red fish, you have to be a bit of a maverick. What did they call me? Provocateur and tyrant. That was it. Yes. I mean, they're right. You know, they're not wrong to say that I'm a tyrant. I am. You know, I am. I don't listen to anybody. I mean, when I say I don't listen to anybody, I listen to my staff. But when some random person on Twitter tells me, you really should do X, I'm not listening to him. I listen to my staff very much, and the reason why I listen to my teachers is because they're there, and they have the same values that I have, and we have the same goals. So we talk, and we discuss, and we change according to whatever we think works best. And so I love that, and I love my staff for that reason, because they're bold enough to be able to talk to me and tell me when they think I'm wrong about something. And that's why the school is so good, because it isn't just my ideas. I'm not a genius. The school is filled with the ideas of all of the teachers who work there now and who have worked there in the past. So you do have to have a strong leader at the top. It comes back to my shoe slide, you know. It's very hard to run a good school and to teach well. It really is. And anybody who's done it understands how hard it is and then tries to get better at it. The problem is, I'll tell you why people don't realize how hard it is. Because people just teach and they think, I've done it. And when kids fail, they say it's not my fault. But actually, if you take responsibility as a teacher for all of the children in your care, then suddenly you realize how hard it is, right? Because you've got to get every one of those children to do the best that he can do. You've also got every one of those children, you've got to get them to build a moral core, to understand the difference between right and wrong, to become the kind of adult that you would respect. That's a hard job, you know, and partly I think this has to do with it historically having been a woman's job, you know. It's women who bring up their children. It tended to be women, and still tends to be women, who go into teaching. And because of that, we just, as a society, we don't really respect it because any woman could do it, you know? And the fact is that it's really, 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 really hard. And unless you've done it and failed at it and then spent years perfecting the trade, you never understand that. And, you know, it's not paid enough. I understand in Hungary in particular, this is a problem, you know, so a job that isn't paid very much, people don't respect, which is a great shame, because the children are the future to any country, right? The children are the most important thing. And that means families and schools are those are the two things that are going to enable a child to be able to make something of his life. his family and his school. He has to be in a good school with good teachers, and he needs a family who's going to support him. If he has those two things, he has a chance to be able to do something with his life.
Katri, you're coming back to your pedagogy, but could you share with us more about how you lead the school? So how do you work together with your subordinates? How do you organize the work of the school? How do you regulate the operation of the school? How you achieve what you mentioned, that there is no bureaucracy in your school? So how you achieve all those things as a leader?
I have a tin of chocolate biscuits, okay? And there's some really nice chocolate biscuits in my tin. And I tell all of the staff they must come and eat the chocolate biscuits. And I invite them to come and see me all of the time. So most of the day, I am having meetings with my teachers, and I offer them a biscuit, and they come in. And I have this culture of candor, of truthfulness, where they come and they say, this isn't working, this is a problem. You know, I wonder what you said this yesterday at our staff meeting. What did you mean? And I'm constantly talking to them. I send them emails. So here, from Budapest, I send them emails. I read an email yesterday written in The Guardian, our very leftist newspaper, it was about littering, throwing litter on the floor, on the ground. And this woman was arguing to say that when people litter, they are not responsible for their littering. They are simply commenting on how society makes them feel. And I mean, it was so absurd. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I thought, how can we not even be responsible for the litter that we throw on the ground? So I sent it to my staff, and in my usual way, I said something like, if ever we thought this was the end of the West, this confirms it. We are no longer responsible even for when we throw litter in the street. Now, even now, I'm in here in Budapest, I send them articles, I comment on it, and then what will happen is a member of staff might write back and say, oh, at my last school, there was so much litter everywhere, blah, 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 blah. And then I will send that back to the staff and say, look at what John has written, da-di-da-di-da. So there is a constant conversation that I'm having with my staff all of the time about the world, about philosophy. I had Roger Scruton come, I had Jordan Peterson come, I have all kinds of people come to talk to the staff. And then we talk about what they think and why they think it. And so we're always thinking about ideas and pushing the boat out, you know, questioning what we already thought. And that's important for teachers, to question what they think. Because otherwise, they just spend their lives, teachers just spend their lives being like each other, all being the same, thinking in this groupthink manner. And we need people to think outside the box, you know, as that thing said earlier, you know, the title for today was Thinking Outside the Box. So I'm always very much trying to get them to think outside the box.
And how do you reduce bureaucracy?
Oh, the bureaucracy. Well, you just don't write stuff down. So listen, when we first opened, the Department for Education, with the new free schools, they would send someone along. Every 3 to 4 months, they would visit with an Ofsted inspector. Now, the Ofsted inspector, this is the inspectorate that goes around and looks at schools and gives them the outstanding or satisfactory or whatever grade. And they would come to visit these free schools because they wanted to advise them on what result they might get and tell them you must do this, and so on. And so these people would come every 4 months or so, and they would look at the school, and they were always impressed and so on. They'd say, Katharine, where is your 3-year plan? And I'd say, well, I'm planning to do this and this. They say, no. Where is the paper? I say, there is no paper. They say, where is your self-evaluation form? And I said, what's a self-evaluation form? I am not writing a self-evaluation form. I'm not writing any of these things. And this woman, she'd put her hands together, and she would beg me. She would say, Katharine, please, you've got to write these things. And I said, I'm not writing them. And they said, the Ofsted ratings are 1, 2, 3, 4. She said, you could get anywhere from a 1 to a 4, and we want you to get a 1. And I said to her, if the inspectorate system could give me anywhere from a 1 to a 4, and the difference that will make it so that I get a 1 is that I write something on a piece of paper, then there's something wrong with the inspectorate system. And I refuse to do it. And she would beg me every week or every 4 months. She would beg, and he would beg. And I said, no, I'm not doing it. And this Ofsted inspector, he was, so he had been a principal of 2 schools before he became an inspector. And after his 4th or 5th visit, and he and I used to argue all the time because he would get very frustrated with me. And he said to me, I said to him, after the 4th or 5th visit, I said to him, Kerry, his name was Kerry, I said, if you were to go back to being a principal now and took over a school, would you do anything differently? And you know, he paused and he looked to the sky and he said, well, Katharine, you would be pleased to know I would write a lot less down. So I felt I had won my arguments with them. Look, the fact is, you either believe, you know what he said to me at the beginning when he first came? He said to me, well, Katharine, you know that if it's not written down, then it's not being done. And I said, quite the opposite. If you're spending all your time writing it down, then you're not doing it. So it is just to change your mindset about these things. Just don't write it down. Now, I write down stuff if I'm going to forget it. So I write down my agenda. So here's an example. Every morning I meet with my senior team at 7 a.m. Often meetings in other schools have agendas. You write down the points that you are going to talk about. You hand this out to everybody. It takes a long time to write the agenda and then give it to everybody. And people discuss, should we have that item on the agenda? Lots of time is wasted. I never write down, I've never written, in the 8 years I've run the school, I've never written a single agenda. For any of my staff meetings, for any of my senior team meetings that happen every single day, I have never written an agenda. Everybody just gets used to the fact that I come along with notes that I've written for myself, so I remember what I'm going to say, but I'm not typing out some agenda for everyone. It's a waste of time. So you've just always got to ask yourself, is this for show? Is this just because it looks good? Or is this actually helpful in running the school?
I have a question concerning the interesting parallel raised by Dr. Halász. In the situation of multi-ethnic inner city schools in the UK, and of course we have vaguely similar, some vaguely similar similarities rather with schools in Hungary that are in disprivileged areas and with high percentages of Roma children. My question concerns the importance of national identity, which you talk about a lot, and you're hounded for that too. So your message is that it is key to instill pride in national identity and pride in Britishness among these kids who are of very different linguistic, ethnic, religious backgrounds. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the only thing we have in common is our Britishness. Because we're all different races and different ethnic backgrounds and different cultures, different religions. But the one thing we have in common is that we are British. And too often in a so-called progressive society, we encourage children to be divided and to identify with their home, their origins, you know, the country that they've come from. So, you know, the kids whose parents are from Jamaica, you say to them, oh, you're Jamaican. And then the kids whose parents are from Ghana, oh, you're from Ghana, and you're from India, and you're from et cetera, when they're not. They're British. Now, of course, they should feel some affiliation to the country where their parents are from. They might go and visit there often. They have family. They have certain customs from that part of the world. Fine. But they should also see themselves as British. And I think this is denied often to ethnic minorities in Britain because their white teachers feel so uncomfortable with encouraging everyone to be British because the white teacher feels uncomfortable about being British and feels awkward, therefore they never talk about it, and the ethnic minority child grows up without a sense of belonging to his country. And that is a destructive way to raise children or to raise any society, because in the end, you've got a bunch of people, adults, who most definitely don't feel they have anything in common with other people around them who are different colors to them. And it's so divisive and so destructive. And so we sing God Save the King. We sing, songs that are national songs in order to instill this love of country. That is probably the most controversial thing that we do. People don't like it. When we are in the World Cup, for instance, we have English flags everywhere. We come to school, we say, how did we do? Did we win? If we win, we celebrate. This is unheard of in Britain. It really is, it's shocking. And you won't understand that here in Hungary because you're normal. The thing is, it's British people that have a problem. You all are normal. Honestly, it's just bizarre the way in which British people are made to feel ashamed of their country. And that's because of their colonial past, the British having dominated the world for so long in terms of our history. British people are then made to feel very uncomfortable about that. And they're then ashamed of their country, which, look, Roger Scruton loved his country. And yet he has to come to Hungary to find a home. It brings me great shame that I come here and I look at this cafe and it's such a wonderful cafe and I think to myself, how is it that we have to come to Hungary to find this? How can we not have this in Britain? And we could not have it in Britain. That is, it is horrifying. It's horrifying. It's horrifying that this man, this great thinker, somebody we should have such pride in, who we should be telling the world about. Look at Roger Scruton, he is ours. And yet you, the Hungarians, are the one that have had to give him a home.
I would add one thing. What you said is very, very inspiring. I started thinking about the Hungarian school where we have the majority of students coming from different national, ethnic background. Afghans, Africans,
Yes.
Syrians, and so on.
Yes.
And I imagine myself that I am the head of this school, and I want to educate them so that they become Hungarians.
Yes.
So I would like to shape their Hungarian identity because they will live here, and this is what is connecting them.
Yes.
So how I would
Okay,
do
good.
that?
Yes.
And I think that I would use your example.
Yes, and in addition, I mean, you're right, because you've picked me up on, it's not just that we sing God Save the King. We teach them British history. We teach them British geography. And you might think, well, all schools teach British history. They don't.
And would you do that differently if you were leading a school where all the students were of British origin?
You mean who are white?
Yeah, yeah. Would
Yeah.
you do the same kind of job, or would you do it in a
that's an
different
interesting
way?
point. Look, the British history that we teach, we make sure that it includes all the different minorities who have participated. So where we went wrong with British history, the way we taught it before, let's say in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, was that we would teach about the Second World War, but we would never mention the hundreds of thousands of Caribbean soldiers that gave their lives for Britain. Or we would never mention the 1 million Indian soldiers that gave their lives for Britain. So all of that is included now in our teaching of British history. And it's important that that is taught to those white children too. Yeah, so when I say British history, we need to understand it encompasses everyone who is part of Britain.
So I'm thinking about the implications for that, for the example that I started thinking about. Having a school in Hungary where there are different nationalities. So how would I teach the Hungarian history to those kids?
Well, you just
using
teach
your
it.
way, your approach.
you just teach it. So, you know, Roger Scruton, when he came to our school, I think it was actually quite instructive to him in some ways. I mean, it was something he wrote about afterwards, which was that he saw, he gave me a quote for our book. So not The Power of Culture, the first one, Battle Hymn of the Tiger Teachers. We have a book, the first book. And there's a quote in there from him soon after his visit to the school. And in the quote, he says something along the lines of, he saw all of these children with all of these different backgrounds learning this British history as if it were theirs, you know? And because it was theirs. It's to believe that this is their history. It's to believe that this is their country. And that is to be able to see beyond the boundaries of race, to see beyond the boundaries of religion, and to think to yourself, this child is here in this country. This is where he is going to make his life. This is his country. As much as it is mine or yours, it is his too. And when you believe that, and you teach it in such a way that you would do to any child, you see past those boundaries of race and religion.
We have one more question before we move on to the audience questions. This relates to your experiences in Asia. You used a metaphor, a tiger metaphor, that is typically used to describe Asian parents, to describe teachers in your school. You talk about the tiger teachers. Having visited China, have you learned anything there that can be used in your practice? And what do you think we can learn, as Europeans can learn from the Chinese model of education?
Yeah, Gabo and I were talking about this earlier. The thing about China, there are things that we need to understand first about China. When it comes to the PISA results, we're just looking there, it's just Shanghai, it's not the whole of China. They're putting forward their best and their brightest. So, you know, you have to sort of ignore Shanghai's results on PISA because it's not real. But they still do a very good job. I'm not going to say that they don't, they do. And, you know, nobody can beat them when it comes to maths. So they're doing an excellent job there, but this is maths, so we've got to also take that into account. We've also got to remember the support that is coming from home. When you have one child in the house, everything is all important. It's just that one child. When I went there and visited various schools, the Chinese teachers were saying to me, of course nobody misbehaves. If someone were to misbehave and you had to call in the parents, you wouldn't just get the parents, you'd get the grandparents, the great-grandparents. You have everyone coming in to what is going on with my child, because they only have the one child. So that makes a difference. It is also the case that culturally in China, this is just, well, culturally, one, there's Confucius, you know, their Confucian ways makes a difference. They have huge respect for their elderly. They listen to what the elderly tell them, the advice. They want to make them proud. That is a massive, massive advantage. But the other thing that's fascinating about the Chinese, and we've got to remember this, which is that while they are really great at maths, and they're really great at lots of this school stuff, when you look at what they do on the world stage, they don't achieve anywhere near as much in terms of like inventors, people who have done extraordinary things. You hear of Hungarians or British people or Americans often. You know, you hear of Steve Jobs and the iPhone, for instance. The Chinese equivalent, you don't hear so much about. And that is interesting. And I think often people think that that's just down to traditional teaching. China does traditional teaching, so that's why they don't have any creativity. I think that's wrong. I think it's more to do with their national culture and their way of being, and that tall poppies in China always get chopped down. That's how they think. So they don't like to think outside the box. They don't like to step outside the box. They like to get good at maths, and it gives them the structure and the order, and they can do that really, really well. And so from that perspective, I really like what they do with younger children, right? younger children at primary age, maybe up to about age 14 or so. I really like that stuff because with younger children, you do need to drill them in the basics. You do need to get them to master that stuff. So it's just at their fingertips, which I think the Chinese do very well. What I don't think they do very well is what comes after that. And add that to their national consciousness, it prevents the kind of creativity and thinking outside the box stuff that's required, I'd say, for real success.
When I was watching videos about your school, when I was seeing the classrooms, the corridors, the students behaving,
Yes.
interacting with teachers,
Yes.
I thought that you must have been inspired by some Chinese experiences, but now I see that that's not the case. So
No.
you invented something which
Yeah.
is very, very similar to what we see when we visit a Japanese classroom or any Southeast Asian country's classroom or school. The level of discipline.
Yeah, the discipline maybe, but you know, I'm not sure you see the same thing. I'm not sure you are seeing the same thing. And also, I think you'd be amazed at how much progressivism is taking over the East. One of my teachers went to Singapore recently, and he went to visit a couple of schools there. And he came back with stories that horrified me. I couldn't believe it. Like, the stuff he was talking about is the same sort of thing that's going on in London. And I was thinking, I couldn't wait to hear about his experiences in Singapore. And when he came back and told me his stories, I thought, we have nothing to learn from that. It's all it's gone crazy. So this is what I say to you about a warning.
Would you say that Singapore is going to the wrong direction?
Yeah, they're becoming progressive. In fact, they already are progressive. His experiences there in these two schools, I could not believe. It sounded just like a British school, except the kids are better behaved, obviously, because their families are behind them. They haven't yet destroyed everything completely, but that's coming in Singapore. It's on its way. You wait and see in 20 years what's going to happen. Same thing happened with Finland. Same thing. 20 years ago, everybody was talking about Finland, saying, look at Finland, it's at the top of the PISA results, Finland is amazing. And Finland was doing progressive teaching. Of course, 2 years before that, it had been doing traditional teaching for forever, right? And then it changed to becoming more progressive, and everybody kept saying, look at the results. We've got to do as the Finns do. And I said, just wait. Because the problem with education is that it takes a long time to see the results of one particular way of doing things. So progressivism started with Finland in the early 2000s. Everybody said, let's copy them. And I said, let's wait. I said, you just wait. And just now in the latest PISA results, Finland did that. And I said, there you go. It's what I've been predicting for 20 years. But it took 20 years to get there. That's the problem. And so people are so easily like, warning bells. I am ringing warning bells for you as loudly as I can. Because people don't realize it. You will talk to your friends who have kids and so on. Watch what they're like with them. Do they tell them off? Do they punish them? Or do they try and be friendly with them? This stuff creeps in bit by bit and you don't notice it. And you're a frog, if you put a frog in cold water and you turn it up slowly, it boils to death. You put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out, right? And the problem is that the heat is turned up ever so slowly on us, and you don't see it happening. So that's why I am ringing some big warning bells right now for you. If they'd rung them for Finland wouldn't be in the position it is now, which is deep regret, But then what's awful, I say deep regret, they don't realize. What then happens in these progressive situations is they say, it's because we're not progressive enough. We have to get even more progressive. And then they get more and more progressive, and things get worse and worse, and then you never get out of it. It's the end, America is a great example in many of the cities where progressivism has taken over and destroyed those cities completely.
I hate to say it because we could listen to Katharine and Professor Halász for hours, but we have to move on to the second part of our panel where the audience gets to ask questions. Now we are slowly but surely running out of time, so please keep it brief. Yes, we're using the traditional method, and Levente will help with the microphones. Thank you.
I'm wondering, Do you find it hard to get teachers? Because so many teachers have also been educated within progressivism.
Yeah.
Secondly, do you have a large dropout rate? Are there some children that don't respond? And thirdly, what do you think about grammar schools and generally streaming, that sort of thing?
Okay, lots of questions. All right, so the first one was teachers. Yes, like I can't find an art teacher, impossible, because of the subject. You know, artists are artists, and so they want you to look at the fruit bowl and just draw, as opposed to this is how you hold the pencil, and this is how you shade, and so on. They don't want to break it down like that. So I find it very difficult to find certain subjects. History teachers, I got dozens, that's easy, because they believe in dates and facts and so on. So it depends on the teacher. Oh, I see, yes. They've all been taught in a progressive way, but they come to the school. Yes. Yes, so that is a problem, but we try and de-brainwash them. So when I'm writing my emails and having those conversations, that's me trying to get them to think differently. So what I always say is, when they start, I say, look, I can already predict exactly what you think about everything. I already know what you think about the environment and what you think about, I don't know, everything. I just know, I just take a typical leftist view. I already know what they think about everything. I say, so you're in this pot over here. We are all out here. So you don't have to think just like me, but I need you to come out of that pot, right? So they kind of understand that that's their goal, and then they'll have different ideas, and they'll be somewhere out here as opposed to being in that pot where people are not responsible for their own littering, for instance. No. Everyone who comes to my school, not just the teachers, the office staff, the caretakers, everybody changes. Everybody does. And everyone who leaves always says to me, I'm a better person now for having worked at Michaela. So that's the first one. What was the second question? Oh, kids leaving. There's very few. There's very few because we do an excellent job. So the kids suddenly transform at home, they're behaving, they're thanking their mother for doing the cooking, you know, and then in the end they just sort of stay. And even the ones who are in trouble all the time or whose parents hate us, they keep going because their parents aren't engaged enough to actually take their child out and put them somewhere else. So that there's a few, but very few. And the ones who leave, it's because they moved out or something. And the third point about grammar schools, I mean, that's a big one. Grammar schools are selective state schools, so public schools that kids do not pay for, but they are selective. So you have to pass a test to get into that school. They are highly controversial in Britain because, I mean, that idea might not be controversial here, but in Britain it's controversial because it seems wrong to have a school that the taxpayers pay for, but that not any kid can go to, that only clever kids can go to. I used to be against them. Well, I used to be against them because of what I just said. It doesn't seem fair. And I thought if you just do it right, then it will work. And that's true. If you do it right, our school is comprehensive. It's not a grammar school. We've got the, whole gamut of ability. The problem is that so few people are willing to do it right. So, and then I thought, I was naive. I thought, all I need to do is show people. And if I show people, everybody will do it the right way, and then we'll save the country. Of course, that is not what's happened at all.
Is it spreading at all?
What's that?
Is it spreading at all? Are there
Yes. So there are, and it is spreading, but very slowly. And it is just very hard, one, to persuade people. And even if you persuade them up here, it's how do they get it down here? I always talk about first you get it up here in your head, and then you've got to get it down here, where it's just an instinct. In fact, I saw that, a quote from Roger Scruton, somewhere, over there somewhere. Something about conservatism being an instinct. I think it's over there. It's an instinct. And their instincts are not conservative. So how do you get a whole country to change? That is hard.
Well, they managed to make it change this way somehow.
Yeah.
What about teaching religion in your school? I mean Christian religion, the values of Christian religion.
Yes, well, we teach the various different religions. So we teach the three big ones, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and their histories and their ideas behind them and so on. But that really is contained in religion, the subject, you know. The values of the school, it's very interesting because some people claim that they say, oh, it's obviously a Catholic school, and others say it's obviously a Hindu school, and it's obviously an Islamic school. And it's just that our values are old-fashioned. So every religion out there thinks that actually it's one of their schools. But actually, we are a secular school that just believes in the kinds of values that standard religions tend to believe in, you know?
You mentioned this in your regulations, in your mission statement or rules.
Yes.
You make a statement on
Oh, yeah?
religion.
Oh, do we? Yeah, well, we are secular. We're a secular school that seems to be very religious. Any others?
Sorry, I ask to Hungarian.
Yes.
Két kérdésem lenne, de először is őszinte szívvel gratulálok Katharine-nek, mert ilyen csodálatos előadást ritkán hallottam itt a MCC-ben.
Gentlemen would like to ask two questions, but first of all, heartfelt congratulations. I very, very rarely see anything better, heard anything better here at MCC.
Oh. Thank you. How do I say it again? You taught me, and you need to remind me. Köszönöm, that's it. Köszönöm.
Visszatérve a okostelefonok használatára a gyerekeknél, szeretném elmondani, hogy itt az MCC-ben nekem nagyon sokszor problémát okoz az, hogy a kérdést nem tudom így fölállva, szemtől szembe megtenni, hanem online kell föltenni a kérdést. Na most, ha online teszem föl a kérdést, akkor először is hülyeségeket is lehet kérdezni. Aztán mondom tovább.
With respect to smartphones and what you said about smartphones, one of the problems I'm having with smartphones and the online world nowadays is attending online events, therefore having to ask questions online. And normally when you're online, it seems anything goes. Anything can be said, even stupid things.
Nem anonimus került föl a kérdés, és például ebben a teremben is itt volt a miniszter, és 18 online kérdés ment, és abból 3-at választottak ki, és összevontak. Tehát mi az ön véleménye? Hogy nem gyerek, de ez az általános iskolában, középiskolában és egyetemeken is ez a magyar rendszer, hogy online névtelenül kérdeznek. Tehát
The problem with the online world is its anonymity. The fact that you can actually just remain anonymous behind some sort of a handle.
Yeah.
Just last time there was a presentation here and the minister was present. 18 questions were posed online and 3 were selected, it seems not quite randomly, and then even those were abridged. So what's your opinion about this? Online questions, anonymity?
Yeah, no, I
a
agree.
második kérdésem pedig arról szólna, hogy az ön iskolájából mennyien kerülnek föl egyetemre, vagy ezt nem tartja fontosnak?
Do you have any records as to how many children make it to university from your school? Do you consider that important, that anybody who finishes in your school should go to university?
No, I don't necessarily. I think anyone who has the ability to make a success of their time at university should go to university. So it would be wrong to push somebody into university who would not be able to make a success of it. But it would be also wrong if there were a child who could have made a success of university who doesn't end up going. Although I say that, not everybody wants to go to university. The key thing is that you have the knowledge and skills to, when you leave school, to be able to make the right decisions for your life that will enable you to fulfill your talents and find purpose in life. Purpose is what brings you happiness. Not earning lots of money, not entertaining yourself. It's purpose. Once you find something that gives you a reason for getting up every morning and you love it, then you will never work a day in your life. And that is important for all children to have that opportunity. And that does not necessarily mean going to university. Having said that, we promote university massively with the children because a lot of them might not necessarily hear of university if it were not for us. So it is our duty to make sure that they know about the options. The point about online world, absolutely, it's horrifying. All of the anonymity, the rudeness, people who would never, they are rude in ways online that they would never do in person to somebody. And so it makes us into horrible people. It's changed our characters and the character of our country in the way that we behave towards each other. And that's for adults, let alone children. Every argument that happens between children always starts on social media. Every fight has started on social media. They are in danger because of the lives that they are living on social media. They are made to feel inferior and inadequate. The girls in particular need to make themselves look older. They put on lipstick. They pout their lips out. They try and do everything to make themselves seem more attractive. It's just awful. It's awful and poisonous. Parents don't know what their children are doing online and the people who they're meeting and how their lives are being destroyed. So this is something that every country needs to get a hold of. And again, it's creeping up on us. We don't see it happening. And people like me keep shouting about it, but I sometimes feel like I am shouting into an abyss when nobody is hearing me, because not enough people are taking it seriously. And, you know, it's not a surprise that this man who likes what I'm saying is if he doesn't mind me saying, is older, you know. On Twitter, all of my followers are over the age of 60, you know.
I try to think with your mind, with your brain, and I am thinking about what answer I would have given to this university, going to university question, if I was in your skin. Mm-hmm. So perhaps I would answer the following, and you will tell me whether that's realistic or not. Mm-hmm. We do not care much about whether someone is going directly to a university after finishing studies in our school, but we want to prepare our kids so that if later in their life it happens to them that for their career they need tertiary level studies, they can do it, because we develop their basic skills, their learning capacity, their motivation to learn, and that's more important for us. So we are thinking in a kind of lifelong learning perspective. That's not necessarily going immediately after the school to university. Is it very far from what you could answer, or you would say that, yes, that's okay, more or less the way we think?
That's true. I mean, the reason why I say, you see, you won't know about the situation in Britain, which is that there are universities that give out degrees that are worth nothing. And children don't, especially from poorer backgrounds, don't know this. And they apply to go to these universities because they think, oh, I need to go to university. And they get a degree that is meaningless and it makes no difference to them. They would have been better off learning a trade like becoming a plumber and becoming a plumber, right? And earning money. In fact, plumbers earn more than teachers. They earn more than a whole bunch of people. So, you know, like, the main thing is to find purpose in life, to fulfill your talents, whatever those talents may be. Sometimes that might be through university. Sometimes it's through other ways.
We have time for one final short question from the gentleman.
It's more about management of your staff at school. What role does observation in the classrooms play? How is it used, and do you observe yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. So no, I don't. You know, people, it's funny, they call me the strictest headmistress. They imagine I'm in the corridors with whips and chains. I'm not even in the lessons. And I don't observe the lessons because I know that I'm very scary. And I don't want to scare my staff. And plus, I wouldn't even see what they're actually doing. So that, you know, normally, people often with observations in schools, the teacher is told on the 5th of May, we're coming in to do an observation. The teacher prepares for the observation and they do this lesson, which they would never normally teach. It's a waste of time. What is more important with observations is that you see the teacher as they are all of the time. So colleagues go and observe each other constantly. And that is happening, you know, 30 times a day. There are colleagues in each other's classrooms observing. But I never go. What happens is the colleagues go in and they write up a little email to the teacher and they copy in feedback on the email, and the feedback email I can see. So I can see what's happening across the school simply by reading my emails.
That brings our event today to an end. Thank you very much indeed to Katharine Birbalsingh of Michaela School in Wembley Park, London, to accepting our invitation, and also to Professor Gábor Halász of the Learning Institute and Eötvös Loránd University for his valuable contributions. I agree with the gentleman wholeheartedly at the back that this event has been MCC at its very best.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and staying so late. It's very good of you.
Thank you very much for the audience and the questions.